Okay. I'll
This
get
is
that first.
Paul Schneiderman today on the 148th edition of the Sports Untold podcast, also on Rainier Avenue Radio, a Seattle-based show. But we're getting guests from around the country. And today I have a special guest, Carlos Del Valle. Carlos has had a long career as a sports broadcaster, mostly in Western Washington, Southern California. We have a great chat today. Carlos will get back to you in a minute or two. Just going to go through a couple of housekeeping things. My
All
assistant and
right.
producer, it's Olivia Coyne. Olivia's doing a great job. She just been helping with this podcast now for, I don't know, about a year now. And she's a recent graduate, University of Washington. She's looking at going to law school now. My podcast is now on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, iTunes, Podbean. You can go to sportsuntoldpodcast.net. I encourage my listeners to click the like button regarding my show, not the hate button, but the like button. Um, and you can just Google Sports Untold YouTube, and you can watch and listen to a whole bunch of the editions that I have here. Well, Carlos, I promise I get back to you. I'm going to do it right now.
All right.
Carlos has had a long career in sports broadcasting, beginning about the early 80s. He's a University of Idaho graduate. Many people in Western Washington in the 80s and 90s remember Carlos Del Valle as an anchor at KCPQ in Tacoma, and he worked at King 5 for many years as a sports anchor reporter. And he was a pregame and postgame reporter for the Seahawks at one time. In the mid 90s, Carlos made the move to Los Angeles, the big fancy market. And he worked at KMBC and a 3-time Emmy Award winning sports broadcaster. Carlos has done radio and TV. I just learned recently that Carlos was a pre and post game reporter for the Lakers championship teams during those Shaq and Kobe years. Definitely going to ask you some questions about that. Carlos has I think done a couple of movies and TV shows too, and hopefully I did okay with the introduction. University of Idaho grad. I think I mentioned that. But anyhow, Carlos, we appreciate you coming on the 148th edition of the Sports Untold podcast, also on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Congratulations to you, Paul. Congratulations. Keep up the good work.
Well, having some fun. I don't have a million listeners or anything, but it's just been a fun experience, and it kind of happened through a bunch of kind of little quirky circumstances. But I'm enjoying this, and always been a big sports fan, and I love having conversations with people such as yourself. So, Carlos, why don't you kind of share with us? And many of us have known you or known of you for so many years. How did you get the bug to go into sports broadcasting and the media business?
Well, it started a long time ago. Well, I was at the University of Idaho for a couple of years, and I actually flunked out of school. And I was working down in Boise, Idaho. I was driving trucks for a company called Garrett Freight Lines. Some people may remember it, some people may not, but that was a big freight line company in Idaho and Washington in those days. And I was down driving 18-wheelers and delivering stuff all throughout Boise, Napa, all the area down there. And one day I said, I got to get back to school. I mean, this is ridiculous. I don't want, not that I was making actually great money, that kind of thing, but it was hard work. It isn't something I wanted to do the rest of my life. So I decided to go back to school. And when I got back in school, what I had done before was business, which I'm not really good at math. I'm not going to lie to you right now. I'm not good at math at all, that kind of thing. But I decided I had to get back to school. And one thing I really enjoyed was sports. Well, there was a guy there who actually got me involved in doing, of all things, for KUID, the television broadcast of the basketball games for the University of Idaho. So I started doing that, then baseball games also. And it was something that I'd never done before. I mean, I knew I had great knowledge of it. I understood it. I understood the games. I played different games, played a lot of basketball in my life. And one thing led to another, and I ended up getting a degree in journalism from there. And then what I ended up doing, because I wanted to do an internship in a large market, my girlfriend at the time was also in radio and television broadcasting. She was in journalism at WSU. She said, you know what, why don't you just come over here, talk with a guy there and my counselor, and see if he can get you hooked up with one of the stations in Seattle. And I go, well, I go to school here. Yeah, but they don't care. So I go, all right. So I went over, talked to her counselor. Her counselor set me up with an internship at Cairo Radio with Wayne Cody and the television station there at Cairo. Wayne Cody, the we'll have stories about him later. I'll tell you about that later too. One of the most amazing guys I ever met, and we'll still think of it. I'm sure Tom Glasgow has great things to say about him too. But anyway, moving on with that, got there, did an internship, ended up staying in the area, and then KCPQ was starting a well, they were starting broadcasting. They were starting to do 5-minute windows every hour, where weather and a little bit of sports, but mostly weather and then mostly news. And so I got started doing it there, and I was actually doing the weather, I was doing the news, I was doing anything I could to get on the air. And one thing led to another, and we started doing more and more and more, little 5-minute newscasts, little 10-minute newscasts. And then Tony Ventrella approached me and said, would you like to be the sports reporter for King TV? We'd really like to have you come up here at King TV. And I said, sure, that'd be great. And so one thing led to another. Started as a sports reporter, moved to the weekend anchor, then weekday anchor when Tony left, and then went from there down here to Los Angeles to KNBC, and started working with Fred Rogan, and I was the weekend sports anchor here. And we also did a lot of shows, a lot of different work, and that's how I ended up doing that. And I got out of it back, I think, wow, it's been a while. I think it was 1995, 96. It was after, right after the Olympics. It was 2005. I mean, I got into it here at 1995, and I got out of it in 2005, 2006. It was right after the Olympics which was another thing that was fun to cover while I was at KNBC, the Olympics in Salt Lake City. So that was kind of my career. And then I ended up getting into commercials, voiceover work with some different agencies here in Los Angeles. And now I'm semi-retired. I still go out on auditions for commercials and that kind of thing, and still do some voiceover work. But that's kind of my life right now in terms of when I'm not doing that, I'm either hiking or playing golf, one of the two.
Love it, love it. Well, you've had a great run, and I like it how you're still doing commercials and enjoying yourself a lot. Carlos, I wanted to ask you about University of Idaho. Tell us a little bit about your ties to the institution. Are you a Vandals fan, and what were your University of Idaho years like?
Well, what's interesting about that is that I grew up in Moscow, Idaho, of all places. We moved there when I was like 5 years old. It's a long time ago. When I was 5 years old, my parents actually got us out of El Paso, Texas, is where I was born. And we lived on a street called Red Robin Street down in El Paso, Texas. Not in a great area of the city, but and my father kind of figured out that if we don't get out of there, you know, I always say to my brother kiddingly, if we hadn't left there, we'd probably be in jail by now. But that's another story. But it was a good place to get out of. My parents first moved to Wenatchee, Washington when I was 5, and we only lived there for 6 months. My father then ended up getting another job as an electrician at a place called Moscow Electric in Moscow, Idaho, where the University of Idaho is. And so we moved there. I ended up going to parochial school with the nuns, the Earthline nuns, from kindergarten through 8th grade, and then ended up going to high school. And then after that, got into the University of Idaho for a couple of years again before I flunked out. But it was a wonderful community. Moscow, Idaho is an amazing place because it is such, at the time, there was only 7,000, 8,000 people in the entire city, and 4,000 to 5,000 of it were the students. So it was a very much, what would you call it? Very much a small town, college town. It was that kind of thing. But the best part about it was going to high school. I went to high school with a lot of different types of kids. Because there was a lot of different types of teachers at the University of Idaho, from East Indian kids, Black kids, brown kids, Asian kids, all this. So when you think about Moscow, Idaho, the last thing you think about is diversity. But in Moscow High School, I had diversity everywhere in terms of there was farm kids, there was city kids, there was everything. So it was a different diversity of all types of people, and very bright people, because and the other part about it, the teachers were amazing, because the people that sent their kids to school at the high school were obviously a lot of the university personnel, so they wanted to make sure that their kids were getting a good education, so they got good teachers to come in. So it was a great place to grow up. During the summer, it was a little more quiet there, very quiet. It was a real small town because the university had shut down for the summer. It was pretty much, there were some university students going to summer school, but it was quiet. but it was nice. It was, like I said, a great place to grow up. I still have great friends there that I go visit maybe once or twice a year if I can get back there. It's just, yeah. And again, the university was a great place to go to school, and it was a great place to get an education.
I'll tell you, Carlos, in every interview I learned some new things about different topics. I always perceived Moscow, Idaho as being a pretty Caucasian place, but you
Yeah.
held us in that there's actually quite a bit of ethnic diversity there. So
Yeah, quite a bit more than quite a bit more than you'd imagine. It was interesting too because, in fact, my family, Rudy Goldblum, there was a friend of ours who was a photographer, Rudy Goldblum. He was a Jewish guy in his family. They were very good friends with us. Another guy that was a photographer, David Kim, Asian, and his Asian family, they were friends with us. And don't get me wrong, I was, in terms of some of the schooling and stuff, I was one of the only, dark skinned kids in the school, but at the same time, it was no big deal. It was great. It was a wonderful, like I said, it was a wonderful place to grow up. And more importantly, you really got a good education and you got a good view. I guess you could say anything that happened during contemporary times, you knew about it, even in Moscow, Idaho, because of the university and because of things that were going on around the world. We sort of had to keep up with it because of what was going on at the university. So it isn't like you were growing up in a small town and you felt isolated. You learned a little more about things.
well, I loved hearing your soft spot for Moscow, Idaho, University of Idaho.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
it's fun to kind of like you still go. I like how you still go back to your hometown a couple times a year. Carlos, you worked in Tacoma for a while, and
Yeah.
I know Tacoma reasonably well. I went to law school there, and I lived
All
there
right.
for a couple of years. And a thought I have about Tacoma, I want you to pine in on this, is that Tacomans tend to be very sensitive about their city, and they're very proud of the sports in their city. They're
Yeah.
proud they had the Tacoma Stars at one time, the MLS team. They're very proud of the Tacoma Rainiers. Like if I run into some people from Tacoma, I talk about Seattle sports. They want to mention Tacoma sports a bit, UPS, PLU, and stuff. Was that your experience when you worked in Tacoma?
Oh yeah, of course. They were what was amazing and so much fun. Remember, the Tacoma Dome was built while I was there and then started to get use when I was there. So it had such an interest because I loved every year going to the high school sports tournament that was there. And those Tacoma people, whether they had students that were involved in that or didn't have students, it didn't matter. They made sure and went there and supported those sports and supported the programs. Even if they weren't a part of it, they just wanted to make sure that they were there to help out, put money into it, to support them, to support the champions, whether the champions were from Aberdeen or anywhere else. It didn't matter. They just wanted to be there to ensure it. Yeah. And you're right about UPS. UPS had some great teams, though, great small college teams, but great teams. And no, that was fun. That was, they're great people, and they do get a little overshadowed because they're just down the road from Seattle, and Seattle is Seattle and that kind of thing. But Tacoma does have their own sense of identity, and it's a strong sense of identity, which is kind
Oh,
of neat.
Carlos, I've learned that, and if you to a lot with a lot of Tacomans, people in Pierce County, if you say something that may not be that flattering about Tacoma and
Yeah.
Pierce County, boy, you're going to get a response a lot, So
Especially if you say it about Pierce County, because they're strong when it comes to Pierce and King County. There's always this kind of thing going on. You know what I
sure,
mean?
sure,
The headbutting sort of. But
yeah.
it's, I mean, it isn't like it's ugly or anything. It's just is what it is. Both of them have pride in who they are and where they come from.
Well, you may remember this back in the early '80s. There was talk about renaming SeaTac Airport after the late Senator Henry Jackson, and
Yes.
Tacoma did not want that to happen. They wanted
No, no. That was it. I remember that too, of course. Yeah, and Henry Jackson was an amazing politician. There's no doubt about it. And he did a lot of great things for the state. I mean, amazing things for the state. And he was an interesting character and everything else. But, and I don't blame. I mean, SeaTac is what it should be, because let's put it. It's right in the middle. It's in between. It's there. And it's part of Tacoma. It's part of Seattle. It should be that way. And by the way, that's a great airport too. Still to this
yeah, yeah,
day. And it
busy
gets
one.
better and better. Yeah, it gets better and better every year. They take care
A
of
lot
it.
of delays there. A lot of delays there, though. But anyhow, I
Yeah.
wanted to pick your brain on working in Tacoma. So, Carlos, I asked our new friend of mine, but an old friend of yours, Tom Glasgow, this question last week, and I thought it would. I don't like to repeat the same questions to guests, but I do a little bit. I want to ask you this question. So, I want to go into every decade you worked. Let's start. We're going to
Ooh,
go from the 80s to the
okay.
90s, to the knots, to the 20 teens, to the 2020s. What is your favorite sports story you were involved in or that you experienced? And we're going to start with the 80s. Let's start with the 80s first.
Wow. The 80s. That's, well, because I was involved with a lot of Mariner stuff, that was fun. And obviously the Sonics were amazing at that point too. And I had a great time because I got to know downtown Freddie Brown really well, and Gus Williams, who was the original The Wiz. If everybody doesn't forget that, let's not forget that he was amazing. And the athletes that were back then, it was the era of them sort of getting over the hump and making sure that people understood that there's professional sports in Seattle, even though it's tucked up way up in the Northwest like it was, not New York, not LA, it's not Dallas, but there's still a lot that goes on up there and it's good and people support their sports. The 80s was, for me at least, it was learning about what was going on in that city and trying to understand it, trying to understand the people who were the fans of all those different sports, from the Sonics to the Mariners to all those different people. And I even, one of my favorite things too at that time was to go watch the Thunderbirds play hockey way back then. That was fun because it was such a small little arena. And I'm not going to lie to you, I don't like watching hockey on TV, but I love to watch hockey in person. It is still one of my favorite sports to watch in person to this day because there's nothing like it. People have no idea what it's like to go into an arena, whether it's a small arena like it was with the Thunderbirds or the NHL, and feel what goes on and the speed of those people. And they may not score, they may not score 2 or 3 whatever goals, but it doesn't matter. It's just and the footwork and the skate work, and it is like, that's why I still love soccer to this, football, FUTBOL. That's why I still love soccer to this day too, because it's the same sort of thing. It's a beautiful game that's played. If you watch it closely, it's one of the most beautiful games played. But the 80s were sort of that era of me learning about it and watching Seattle sports kind of grow up, that kind of thing.
What was your favorite sports story, though, you covered the 80s? I'm going to put you on the spot. Mention one.
Well, I'm trying to figure out, see, I'm not great with dates. I'm not going to lie to you.
No
And I
problem.
was trying to figure out during the 80s that I assume that was the year of the, well, I'm trying to figure out if that was the year. See, I'm terrible with that kind of thing.
It's
Was
all right.
that year that with Tom Chambers during the 80s? Yes. Chambers during the 80s with his team, watching him play in the All-Star game was one of my favorites. I knew Tom pretty well. He and a friend of mine used to go fishing in Alaska every single year. Chambers was a huge hunter and fisherman, gigantic hunter and fisherman. And they used to go deep sea fishing every year up in Alaska. And he loved doing that. But watching Tom, looking a man who is so strong and just in personality as well as in height and everything about him, and his game was amazing too. But watching him come out to play that game that day, he was a little nervous, was thinking to himself, I got to play well, and he didn't play well right away. And then but they kept giving him the ball because he's the local hero and whatever, and he took off and played well, and watched him do that, and it helped Seattle sports, sort of lifted him up. And he knew, I don't think if he knew at the time what he was doing. A couple of years later, we talked about it. He goes, yeah, you don't think about it then because you're just trying to play the game and you're playing among your peers and you're trying to play well. But you think about it later and you think to yourself how many people appreciated what you did and who you did it for. And the thing about something like that, it always happens 4 to 5, maybe 10 years later, where you start to realize in your brain, because people keep coming up and telling you, I remember when you did this and I saw you do that and I watched you in that game and you were playing with this guy and that guy and this all-star and that all-star, but you were great and we were so happy for you and happy for the city. So that kind of thing was really good.
I remember Chambers. I was up in the rafters at the 87 NBA All-Star game in the Kingdom, and Tom was like a last-minute replacement player, and he got MVP in the 87 All-Star game. So remember that vividly. Are you still in touch with Tom?
No, I haven't talked to him for a long time. Most of the guys that I'm still in touch with, like Peyton, I'm still in touch with Dale Ellis. Do you remember Dale Ellis?
Oh, sure.
One of the greatest human beings and I think I can tell this story now. Yeah, because he's comfortable with it. Years ago, we used to go out once in a while after dinner, after a game or something, go eat, have a couple of drinks, relax, enjoy ourselves, go out, that kind of thing. Not a lot. I didn't do it with a lot of guys. Dale was just a very quiet, humble, great human being. People don't know he was a 3-point god
Oh,
for
yeah.
the league for a period of time. He was amazing, and he was a center in college. People forget that too. But anyway, we talked about it. He came back from the summer. He came back because he went back to Tennessee with his family and that kind of thing. And he came back, and I said, "Hey, let's go get something to eat." He goes, "Okay." So we sat down, and I said, "Hey, what do you want to drink?" "I'm going to have something." He goes, "I'm not drinking anymore." I go, "Oh, okay, cool." He said, "Is that like a good thing or a bad thing?" Because that's kind of the question I ask when somebody says that to me.
Sure.
And it's their choice, and I'm happy, whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't make them any different to me or whatever. And he goes, "Carlos, I realized that every time I drank, I got into trouble or something went wrong. So I just decided to stop it, and my life has changed, and I'm different because of it, and I'm happier because of it, and things are so much better for me." And I thought to myself, I looked at him, I go, "God bless you, man. I'm happy for you, and I'm happy that it's working out." But that's a story that even more important to me than him scoring 40, 50 points. Because he was honest about who he was and how difficult his life was at the time and how he wanted to make sure and change. And he's got, family back home now, and he's happy. He's a great guy. And it's nice to be able to get not necessarily close to a guy that's a sports guy, but just close to a human being who lets you in on their personal problems and, more importantly, their triumphs, that kind of thing. So that's one of my favorite things with him.
Dill is a great shooter. Can you throw a good 90s sports story in?
Well, my favorite 90s sports is obviously the University of Washington football team, the championship team.
Oh, yeah.
I covered every single game. And the year before they won the championship, they, if I'm not mistaken, that was the year they went down to Miami and broke Miami's home streak of 25 or 24 straight games back down in Miami. And and A-Rod, he was there at the game. He was just a rookie, if I'm not mistaken, but he was in the stands, and he was trying to get me to pull him out of the stands so he could walk the sidelines with me of the game. That was the year before. But one of my favorite things about that game was towards the end of the game, they were beating the hell out of the defensive line of Miami, the Hurricanes, the offensive line for Washington. These big old white boys and guys that they were walking up to the line. This is in the fourth quarter when you think they're tired, but they are just ready. And you could tell they're looking across, they're standing there looking before they go down for the hike. They're looking, they got their chest out, and I'm looking at them going, they're kicking their ass. It was one of the coolest things to watch and one of the most amazing things to see. And also during the championship season that year when they won the national championship, to watch, I always stood in the tunnel when they came out, but I stood to the side of the tunnel so I could watch them get ready and get crazy. My favorite thing was watching this little guy stand in front of him, Don James, and everybody kind of looking down on him, and they're like getting crazy to go out there, and he's like, "All right, here we go, boys, here we go." And he brought him out of the tunnel, and I'd watch them run by, and they're screaming and they're yelling. But that was a great football team in so many different ways, and similar to what you had this year with that football team up there, because they could great special teams, great offense, great defense, characters. There are certainly all kinds of characters, hitters, big time hitters and players. So yeah, that was one of my favorite things to do, and watch them go all the way through every single game, home and away, and do what they did.
The next decade, what do we call the first decade of the 21st century? Do we call it the aughts or the knots, whatever? Thinking 2000 through 2009. I want to throw out an idea to you and tell me if you would agree. Was covering the Lakers championship teams, is that your favorite part of that decade?
Yeah, there's no doubt that was because I was right in the middle of it. I mean, I don't know how many. I think I ruined 3 or 4 nice suits being in the middle of the champagne, the spraying of the champagne and trying to get interviews and talking to guys. But it was interesting because there wasn't, I mean, they were together. They played, Robert Horry was amazing. Some of the different things that they pulled off, what they got away with at certain times of games. And you thought to yourself, there's no way they're going to win this game. There's no way they're going to do this. And they always found a way to get things done. Shaq was amazing at that time and in shape, but Kobe Bryant was the most amazing human being when it comes to watching him do what he did every single day. Because there was a lot of the time watching him in practice was actually more amazing and more fun than watching him in games, because you never saw a guy work as hard as he did and do what he did, because he made sure he was the first guy there and the last guy out every single day when it came to practice. And it wasn't that he was trying to show up other people. That's just who he was and how seriously he took the game and who he wanted to be and how he wanted it to translate to the rest of his teammates. And I can see why he butted heads, because there was with Shaq, because there was a lot of times Shaq would come back from the summer, be overweight, out of shape, I'll get in shape when I practice and get ready. That's not Kobe. Kobe was ready to go from the moment he walked in the door. But those teams were so much fun. But there was a little difference. Like when you take like the Sonics, there seemed to be a more cohesive, there seemed to be a more togetherness there with the Sonic teams. With these guys, everybody, I mean, and this was still even before the social network stuff was out there, now, at least as prevalent as it is now. These guys were a little more of themselves. Yeah, we're playing to win championship, but they're a little more of themselves than they are together people. But don't get me wrong, those were great basketball teams, rather. Great NBA basketball teams and fun to watch. One of my favorite guys out of that, and a guy that I still talk to this day, was Rick Fox. Great guy, smart guy, too pretty for his own good, which I like, which I say to him all the time when I see him. But he's a wonderful, wonderful human being. Every time I happen to maybe see him, like down at a restaurant or someplace downtown or whatever the case may be, or walking around or at a sporting event, always, hey, Carlos, how you doing? And then this is funny because I was with some of my friends who came in for, not Oscar week, but not the Grammys, but one of the other events. And they came from New York. We were out one night having dinner, and this is when everybody's in town. So we're at a restaurant, and there's some people eating dinner over there. Paul Simon is having dinner, so they want to talk to him. They go up and talk to him and say, hi, can we get a picture? So I'm taking pictures with them, doing that. We leave there. This is Michelle, and these two women are great. They're friends of my wife, too. And we go to another restaurant. There's Rick Fox. And oh, my God, you should have seen the two of them. They were just, oh, my God, it's Rick Fox. And I go, Rick, would you get a picture with these girls? And he goes, oh, of course. They go, yes. Oh, my God, they went crazy. Because he's a handsome man, but not more importantly, he's a good guy, and he was a great teammate. And quite frankly, he was kind of an enforcer too when it came to playing during those days. He was the baddest. If anybody messed with Kobe or Shaq, he was foot forward and ready to get into it. He was a good dude. Good dude, still is.
I'll tell you, Carlos, I had Jeff Pearlman, the well-known sports author, on my show, and I read Jeff's book about those early 2000s Lakers teams. It struck me as a dysfunctional winning team.
Yeah, and that's a good way to put it, a dysfunctional winning team. But the thing of it is, the guy pulling the strings, brother, the coach, he knew who to work with, who not to work with, who to mess with, who not to mess with, who to mess with him, so he will mess with him to help me get this done over here. Now, Phil was great. I mean, he was an interesting guy, and he's one of those guys that likes to think he is the smartest guy in the room, because in some ways he is. Maybe not always intellectually, but at least organically knowing what's going on around him. He is probably that on top of that completely. He was great at that. Really, really good.
I'm going to ask you some more questions a little later about covering the Lakers during those years, but real quick question. I've asked this question to a whole bunch of different guests. Do you think Robert Horry has a legitimate Hall of Fame case? 7 rings, Mr.
Oh,
June.
yeah. Oh, yeah. You got to look at him as one individual, where each of those teams that he played on, he contributed, yes, but there was also times, if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't have won. And that puts him in a different situation than other teammates. He goes beyond, like, yeah, he was a great teammate and he did good things, or maybe he played good defense, or maybe he shot the ball well when he came off the bench, that kind of stuff. But there was times and situations where the Lakers and other teams that he played on would not have won championships without Robert Ory. And I think that makes a difference. You can't say that about a lot of players. In fact, you can't say that about many players at all. And I think Robert Ory falls in that category. Plus, he's another guy that is a character too. He's a good dude, and he's one of those guys. I call him the subtle killer because he's just out there having a good time. Oh, you got to give me the ball. I got to shoot a three and make it and win. Okay, no problem. And he does do it. And he's not a real get in there. Come on, let's do this, let's do that. Not one of those kind of guys. But he's definitely one of those guys that looks at a guy and I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kick your butt. And he's just that kind of player. He was great. He was fun to watch.
Big shot, Bob. They only averaged about 7 points a game in his NBA regular season career. He was they call him Mr. June, right? Yeah. So
yeah.
So we'll fast track this a bit. What were your favorite sports stories that you either covered that you enjoyed following in the 20-teens decade? What's your favorite sports story so far in the 2020s?
Wow. The 2020s, when I was down here, well, I was lucky enough. I guess one of my favorite things that I ever did down here was I got to carry the Olympic torch for a period of like 3 blocks through the valley. But, because I was working here at KNBC, and NBC, of course, covers all the Olympics every year. And this was the Olympics that was in Atlanta. So that was one of my favorite things to cover, was obviously the Olympics are amazing because most of the time, the covering that we do from a personal point of view, at least like KNBC, what we did, we covered local athletes. So to see a local athlete do what they do from the moment they're getting ready to go to the Olympics, like say 4 years, and start covering them. So maybe like the first story, oh yeah, they want to go, she or he wants to go to the Olympics in boxing or in rowing or in track or something. And you think to yourself, oh, that's great. You're 17, 18 years old, see what happens. But they're really good even at that age. So you start to cover them. But to see the development of that athlete, he or she, as they put themselves in a situation to go to the Olympics and to, more importantly, to get recognized and then make it because of all the trials that they have to go through to get in that situation, and to see how their family is with them and the struggles that their family goes through. Those are some of my favorite stories. And those are some of the favorite things that I ever got to cover. Those were great. Those were fun.
Love it. Great stuff. Great stuff. I asked Glasgow this question recently. I'm gonna ask you the same question. Who's a living sports broadcaster you love to interview or spend some time with, and who's a deceased sports broadcaster in history you would love to have interviewed or spend some time with?
I'd like to go have drinks with Joe Buck. I think that would be fun. His self-deprecation is just amazing. And I think the other guy would be Ernie from TNT. I think those two guys, they're on different levels. They're both still different types of personalities, but sort of the same because they're self-deprecating. They're both very good at what they do. You can tell that if you sit down and carry on, you can just feel that if you sit down and just have a one-on-one conversation with them, you're going to get it. You're going to hear some amazing things and you're going to learn something. That's what I think more importantly is just learning something from somebody else. And especially those two guys, because of the situations they've been in, and then who their parents were, who his father was, Buck's father was, that kind of thing, and what they've seen so far, what they've done, where they've been, and obviously to listen to Ernie talk about Charles would be pretty amazing too. That would be fun. That would be fun to listen to. But as far as a deceased broadcaster, who would that be?
Cosell, Howard, Gifford. I'm just throwing out names.
Well, Cosell would remind me of one of those guys that you couldn't really carry on a conversation. You could sit and listen to him, right. But that might not be bad either, because like you said, like you're probably thinking, he's got great stories too. Gifford would be cool. Gifford would be great. I think Gifford would be fun because of listening to him talk about the old days and how much different the game is now, and how much really the game is different now than it was before. Yeah, Gifford would be great. I'd enjoy that.
Maybe Harry Carey would have been fun to spend time with.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
like,
I think I'd want to go to dinner with him and share a few drinks before dinner and then share a few drinks after dinner and during dinner. I think that would be fun. Yeah, that
I
would
like how
definitely
you
be
throw out Joe Buck or E. Johnson's names. That's fun. That's fun.
fun.
Okay, I'm going to broaden these next two questions. Who's a living sports figure? It can be a player, general manager, someone who's still with us you'd love to interview or spend time with. But who's a deceased sports figure in history? It can be a player, GM, owner, agent, whatever you would have loved to interview or spend some time with.
I'm going to go way back on you for the deceased. Because I was lucky enough to interview almost every year when he came to town, Arthur Ashe, who is still one of my favorite interviews of all time and
Wow.
one of my favorite books of all time. And the reason I say that is the thing that, I mean, it's very heartfelt, it's well done. How he died was a terrible way to die. But more importantly, that last chapter that he wrote to his daughter before he died is one of the most beautiful things you'll ever read. And Arthur Ashe was very smart, very bright, came up through a very difficult time for Black people when it came to sports and just living and trying to survive. And he fought it and did what he did, and he was just an amazing individual. And I was also lucky enough to do that with Muhammad Ali.
Wow.
And do some interviews with Muhammad. I've actually got a great picture of him that he signed and gave to me, Carlos. And yeah, those are two people that, yeah, I mean, if I could interview Arthur again, I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that, just to sit down and talk with him about anything and everything. And most of the time when we had conversations, like a quarter of it would be about tennis. The rest of it would be about so many other things about life, because he was so bright and intellectual and understood how the world worked in so many ways. Yeah, that would be
Those were
great.
incredible men, Arthur Ashe and Muhammad Ali. Incredible that you were able to spend time with each of them. Two other deceased African American sports figures that I would have loved to have spent time with. I mean, there's so many, but I'll throw out Josh Gibson,
Oh yeah.
who now is the leading hitter in baseball, I believe, with the new
What do
reforms.
you think? I actually think that's pretty cool what they did.
I do
That
too.
for baseball to do that took a lot of guts, because
I do too.
nowadays they're going to say to themselves, "What do we got? Woke Major League Baseball now?" That's going to be one of the things that will be thrown out there. But no, those guys were amazing. It wasn't like they were hitting against people that couldn't pitch or that kind of thing. Those were great pitchers and great athletes at the time. And no, yeah, I think it's a great thing too. There's another guy, and I'm going to go way, 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 way back. If I could interview somebody, it would be Jim Thorpe. And I don't know if you remember who Jim Thorpe was.
Of
Yeah,
course.
that was one of the first things that got me interested in sports. I read his book when I was a little kid, and about who he was, where he came from, Osage Indians, and what he went through to get to and to do what he did in the Olympics. Somebody stole his shoes, his track shoes, before he had to go out in the Olympics, and he was wearing two different types of shoes, and he still won all those events, the decathlon, with those two different types of shoes that year at the Olympics. He was an amazing, and he played football, and was an amazing football player. Played baseball, he was an amazing
Incredible
baseball
guy.
player. Yeah, incredible human being, and he again did it in a difficult time for him too, but he made it happen. Amazing guy. That would be one for
Jackie
me.
Robinson. I was going to throw the name Satchel Paige too. I mean, there's so many that are.
No, Jackie Robinson would have. Yeah, see, again, you're talking about a lot of people who had to struggle to play and do the things that they love and enjoy doing, and you're going to find out more from them. You're going to find out from somebody whose dad and mom sent him to baseball school and made sure he had all the right equipment and made sure he played on the right teams and all that kind of thing. You're going to find out more from those guys that had to struggle and do what they needed to do to get to where they got.
Well, Carlos, I appreciate your contributions with your answers to a couple of those questions. I've gotten some amazing feedback from guests. I may actually write a blog about some of the great names that my guests have thrown out when I've asked them about some sports figures they would love to spend time with, or to have spent time with. And one guest I had, a local basketball coach, he had an amazing answer. He said the living sports figure he'd love to spend time with is Oscar Pistorius, that South African track player that got in trouble.
Yeah.
He goes, I just love to pick that guy's brain. So I mentioned Pistorius, just that answer, that how you answer those questions, it's very fascinating what comes to people's minds when I ask those questions.
But didn't he just get let out of prison not that long
I
ago,
believe
if
he
I'm not
did. Yeah, I believe
mistaken?
he did.
Yeah, I think he just got out because he was the one that got in trouble for shooting his wife through the bathroom door, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I thought it was a fascinating answer that Rick gave me to that question. Well, Carlos, you're a big fixture in Seattle in the 80s and 90s. I remember watching you on TV. You're definitely part of our community. What led you to leave Seattle and go to the glitter and glamour of Los Angeles? Tell us about what results in you leaving our market.
Well, that's an interesting question. You think to yourself, do you ever regret doing something? I don't regret it. Seattle was a great place. I think Seattle is a wonderful place. I always say when the sun's out, it's the most beautiful place in the world. But I love living here. I'm not going to lie to you. A lot of it has to do with the weather. A lot of it has to do with the fact that I'm able to go anywhere I want, do anything I want. And I know a lot of people down here. I've become pretty good friends with people. But coming down here to work in this market it just seemed like a great challenge for me, at least something that and I thought to myself, the Dodgers, the Lakers, the Kings, all these different teams, the Angels are right. I mean, there's so much, but at the same time, there were times I missed Seattle because there was a little more there, because here it's like so wide open and so vast. And you have to understand when you come down here, especially from a place like Seattle, you're just in some ways just another name, but another person. But I was lucky enough when I got here, there was a lot of guys that came up to me and worked at different stations that I'd never met in my life that introduced themselves to me and said, hey, welcome to the market. Hope everything goes well. If there's anything we can do for you. And I'm talking guys from CBS, from ABC, from Fox, from these other stations or whatever. And they were always very helpful. And the people that work for the different teams, what can we do for you? How can we make things easier for you? So it was easier for me to get assimilated into everything down here. And I just wanted to try something different. In all honesty, I just wanted to see if I could do it. And hopefully it worked out, but it did work out. And it's been fun, man. There's no doubt about it, because I got to see a lot of different things I wouldn't have seen up in Seattle. But at the same time, I miss a lot of the things that I did see up in Seattle too.
What are the biggest differences you see, Carlos, between Seattle and Los Angeles as sports cities?
I think the major difference is that Seattle fans will stick with their teams no matter what. Like what's happened with the Mariners the last couple of years, how they started hot and then didn't, but there's still people at the stadium. There's still people watching them. People at the beginning of the year thinking, all right, they're going to be great. They're going to do good. They're going to be fine. I mean, it's always that optimism at the beginning. Here in Los Angeles, you better win, period. If you don't win and you don't play well, or even if you don't win, but if you don't appreciate what the fans do for you or are there for you, they're not going to show up. They're just not going to be there. It's just a weird thing. And here, you make a mistake in this town in terms of, say, maybe you get a DUI as an athlete, or you do this or whatever. It's not going to be as difficult for you if you take care of it. Because it's such a smaller town in Seattle, there's more of a spotlight on you and what can happen to you. Here, the stars are the stars here. There's no doubt about it. And if you're part of the team, you're part of the team. But the stars are the stars. And people have to understand it. And that's in television, that's in movies, that's in restaurants that are here, that's in everything when it comes to this town. It's the stars are the stars, and the other people are trying to help the stars. That's kind of what goes on. But that's okay. That doesn't matter to me. I love the city. Like I said, I get to go anywhere I want, do anything I want, enjoy myself here. And I've made a lot of good friends here who have helped me along the way. And it's just a difference in terms of how gigantic this place is in comparison to Seattle. And how in Seattle, everybody kind of knows what you're doing, when you're doing it, which is not a bad thing, because that makes a cohesive city. But here, a lot of people are going to know if they want to know, but if they don't, most of the time people just don't care is what it comes down to.
LA County is bigger population wise in 41 states. Isn't that
Yeah,
incredible? It's
it
just,
is incredible. And it's, what is it? The state of California is like the fifth largest economy in the world, fifth or
something
sixth
like
largest
that.
economy in
Yeah,
the world.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
nuts.
also
It
read
is
this.
nuts.
I also read the city of LA is population wise is large in 25 states. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible. And we
Really
have
something.
the diversity is amazing. It can be off-putting on occasion, like anything can in any city when it comes to that. And there's no doubt that there's still a problem with the unhoused or homeless, whatever. And so, yeah, it's something that they've got to take care of. But at the same time, there's so many other attributes here. I can walk out my door and take a hike, and I can go up into the canyons, come back 13 miles later, and it's beautiful. I'm up overlooking the city, and I can walk from my house to do this. Or I can go up, I can get in a car, I can drive an hour and a half, I can go skiing, or I can drive 20 minutes, I can go to the beach, or I can drive 30 minutes and go down to 45 minutes and go to Disneyland. I mean, there's just so much to do if you
No
want to do
doubt.
it. Yeah,
Can't get too bored of the Los Angeles area, no doubt about it.
no,
Carlos,
I hope not.
You've been in LA now, the LA area now for 30 years. Who do you think is the most popular athlete in Los Angeles since you've been there? Kobe, Shaq, Mike Trout, Otani. Who do you think is the most popular athlete in the 30 years you've been in Los Angeles?
Well, I think there's no doubt Kobe was and still is to a certain extent. Shaq is definitely fun. Shaq is. I'll tell you a story. I was going to a restaurant or a bar that's inside a hotel here, and it's on Sunset Boulevard. And this is like, I've been here for probably 5 years, and so I'm gonna go, and I'm getting out of the car, Uber, whatever it was, it took me there, and I'm getting out, and I'm kind of straightening myself up, and all of a sudden, this big motorcycle pulls up beside me, big, huge Harley, big black guy, and I go, "What the hell is that?" And I look, and I go, "Oh." He goes, "What are you doing?" It was Shaq. I go, "I'm gonna go in here to the Sky Bar, have a drink. You want to come in?" He goes, "No, I can't go in there, man. That's pain in the butt." I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Just start driving around my new bike." And I mean, he just stopped, took his helmet off, chatted for a while. "How you doing? How's it been?" And that's kind of cool when that happens, because I guess maybe simply this is that he knew who I was. He stops, says hello. Not that I'm any big deal, because I'm not compared to who he is, but he just wanted to stop, see what was up. "How you doing? Everything good?" Whatever. And then, "All right, man. Hey, I'll see you soon. All right." Boom, boom, boom. That kind of thing. Shaq is one of the, actually a lot more like that than you'd realize. He's pretty. He's one of these guys that, and he's a guy that walks into places all the time and buys food, like at a restaurant, and pays for everybody's bill and that kind of thing all the time. Or he goes in and sees somebody's having, can't buy all this stuff, like at a Walmart when he's in there. He buys all that stuff for the family that's in. I mean, he just does that all the time for different people. He's a
He
good guy. He
he
really is.
paid he paid for George Mikan's funeral years ago. I mean,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He's just, I think many people, I don't think many people. I think there are a lot more people that would do that if they had the money to be able to do that, would be more altruistic about who they are and what they do with that kind of thing. But he doesn't have to be, but he has done it for so long. That's the kind of person he is. And he went back to school. Remember, he
Right.
finished and got his degree because he told his mom, "Okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it." And went back to LSU. And not only did he get a degree, excuse me, but he went back and got a doctorate also. And the reason he got a doctorate, he said this, was because he got tired of having his, not that he didn't trust his agent, because he trusts his agent, but he wanted to know what they were talking about, how, what it meant, all the paperwork, what was this, what was that. He wanted to learn that too, so he could speak. So after a while, he didn't need his agent. He asked the guy that he was doing business with what the deal is and how are we making this happen? What are the rules, regulations, yada, yada, yada. How much is this? How much is that? And he did that on his own. That's why he got his doctors, to make sure that he knew what was going on. And he's an amazing businessman to this day.
Yeah,
Like
he owns a
magic.
couple. I think he has an ownership interest in a couple a chicken restaurant that's in the new Climate Pledge Arena where the Kraken play. I think he has a little
Yeah,
chunk of that business too. So,
yeah,
so
yeah.
you can make a case in the last 30 years since you've been in Los Angeles, Shaquille O'Neal is the most popular athlete in the LA area. You can make
Oh
that case.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you could probably make that case. And
Yeah.
there's no doubt if Kobe was still alive, he
Yeah.
would they'd be like this. Kind of like they were when when they were on the team together. Yeah.
Right. Right. What's your favorite sports movie?
Oh wow. You're killing me, Smalls. You remember that movie?
What's it
The
called?
baseball where the catcher is oh my god, it's a baseball movie with the dog was called Hercules and the kids were Sandlot.
Sandlot. Okay.
Sandlot.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
that's my favorite. That's one of my favorite sports movies ever, Sandlot. And people are going to go, "What's Sandlot? What is it?" Folks, if you get it, see it. You'll love it. It's funny. It's laughable. It's a great movie. It's just one of these down home kind of baseball movies that about kids just trying to play baseball and use this sandlot to do it. And one of them grows up to be a pro player. But it's not just even that. It's a beautiful film, and about it's just a great movie and it's funny. But Killing Me Smalls is the kid that's the catcher, this
Okay.
kind of chunky redheaded catcher kid who every time the kid was doing something bad, he's going, "You're killing me, Smalls," and that kind of crap. It's a great movie.
I
Sandlot.
don't, I gotta tell you, I don't remember if I saw it. I probably didn't see it, but I don't remember it. So
Well, if you get a chance and text me back after you see it, let me know what you think.
absolutely. No,
I think you would
thanks for adding a
appreciate it.
new movie there. Now, by the way, Carlos, I read online that you've been in a couple TV shows and movies. Were you, I think you had a role in a 2006 movie, Crooked?
Yeah, yeah, I
Okay,
just
tell us
did.
about that experience.
Well, most of that stuff that I did, I usually played like the sports, not sports, but news anchor or news person that was there on the scene of a crime or something like that.
Yeah.
And I also did Days of Our Lives, where I actually was reporting outside of a place or outside of the place where they were going to put the criminal to death with the what do you call that? Oh god, my brain's not working. With the three different chemicals, where they have to put him out like that. And so I actually had to run through and look at the camera and talk about the fact this is what he's got to do. It's the pentothal and sodium pentothal and do this and do that. So that was for Days of Our Lives, which is an NBC. And they came up and asked me, would you be the news person during the show? So yeah, and I did some television shows and that kind of thing. That I haven't done that in a long time, but that still would be fun. I've done some commercials. I've done some AT&T commercials and I don't know. I mean Snickers commercials and all kinds of different things. Yeah, anything and nowadays any commercials that I'm sent out for have more to do with being my age appropriate, that kind of thing, like what you see with all the drug commercials that are on there now. So most of the time the auditions that I'm sent out are those.
This is kind of a kind of a naive question that people outside of Southern California frequently ask Southern Californians. Is there any famous movie star or two you spent time with?
Oh wow. No, most of my guys, that in all honesty, I'm a big rock and roll fan. So my good friends are the guys from Alice in Chains.
Oh, okay,
They're still my friends to this day.
good.
And I play golf with Mike Inez every once in a while. We play golf. We still go back and forth and chat all the time. And because he's
Fun.
an old dear friend of mine. In fact, when I first moved here, he called me and had me come meet him. He's a character. He was living on a boat at the time behind in the marina behind the Four Seasons Hotel. And yeah, he was, and he used the Four Seasons Hotel shower and workout area. And he had this really nice boat that he was living in. It was right behind. There was dock right behind it. So yeah, he's a character. Most of my friends are music guys. Is who the guys are. And John Corbett is still a good friend of mine too. He was in the Seattle television show up there for a long time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Hey, I want to ask you about Kobe Bryant. There's and he sadly, as you know, we lost him, I think, in early 2020. There's some have said that Kobe became a nicer, warmer guy when he got a little bit older. Do you buy that? That he kind of got a little sweeter, maybe?
I think to a certain extent, and I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that he became such an amazing girl dad, and especially with his daughters, and especially with the daughter that died with him in the helicopter crash, because he was going to be a really good basketball player. But it wasn't that was important to him. It was the fact that he was able to spend so much time with her and with his other daughters, because he loved being around them, and they loved being around him and learning from him, hanging out with him and laughing with him. And I think when he got away from the competition thing, he was able to teach his children, especially his daughters, in terms of competing and playing the game. It became a softer side of him, because it isn't like he can yell at them. Well, I'm sure he probably did at certain occasions, but at the same time, he had to get on a different side to teach them, to help them learn to be the best human beings they can be on and off the basketball court. And from what I understand, that's how it became a little softer, because it wasn't males he was dealing with, it was strictly female. And there was a story not that long ago that I saw on one of the local news stations about the team that she was playing on. They kept up and he was coaching at the time, they kept up all his principles throughout everything that he had taught them. As in high school, they ended up winning a high school championship. All the different girls that played with him and with his daughter at such a young age, and that he was teaching them, and all the different stuff that he wanted to embed in them about being the kind of person and being a good athlete, being a good teammate. And they ended up winning a championship without him, obviously, because he's not around anymore. Yeah, it was a great story. In fact, if I can find it, I'll send it to you. I'll text it to you, because it's a great, and these girls were just, they couldn't say, they couldn't stop themselves from just sort of getting emotional, talking about him and the things that he did for them and how great he was and how he made them understand. And they wanted to stress this point. They wanted to make sure that they understood it wasn't just about basketball. It was everything else that had a lot to do with how he helped us. So that was kind of cool. Yeah, that was
Thanks
great.
for sharing that. That's neat that his legacy is still continuing heavily with women's and girls basketball. Carlos, for many years when you were in the LA area, LA had no NFL team. What was it, about 20 years or so, 25 years?
Yeah.
Now LA has two teams. Do you think one team's enough for Los Angeles, one NFL team?
No, I think there really is an interesting, what for better lack of word, a dichotomy between these two teams in terms of fan support, in terms of coaching, in terms of their approach to how they want fans, how they look at their fans, how the fans look at their teams. So, and there's so many, as you mentioned, there's so many people down here. And it's great because there are times, say, I just want to go to a game and I want to buy a ticket to watch a good team come in. I can sit like in the third or fourth row in the end zone of a Charger game and be able to see a really good team play, or I got friends that have tickets to the Rams, pretty nice tickets, and he'll give me, and I'll always see the Seahawks. They always give me their Seahawks tickets. So I'm able to see the Seahawks when they come to town. So I got great seats for the Rams too. But it's interesting because it's a whole different crowd in each one of those. So yeah, there's definitely room for two teams. Definitely room for two teams.
You can see though why St. Louis fans were sad to lose the Rams, and San Diego fans were sad to move the Chargers, though, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, no doubt about it. Even though I don't know, hopefully Harbaugh can do something about the Chargers understanding how they can always figure out a way to lose games at the end. But because that football team should have been so much better the last 5 and 6 years. That defense was one of the badass defenses in the NFL in terms of personnel for the past 4 or 5 years. But for some reason, they couldn't get them to do what they needed them to do. And maybe Harbaugh will be able to do that. And the Rams, I'm telling you, they're coming back again. Even you losing Donald, it's not going to make that big a deal. That team has gotten better. They know what they're doing. I'm still a Seahawks fan through and through. I always will be. But there's something about the way that coach does what he does with the players that he's got, and they always seem to pick the right kind of player to play on that kind of offense that they've got too. So yeah, if I was Seattle, I'd be nervous about the Rams. And if I was in the West with the AFC, I'd be nervous about the Chargers too. I think both teams got shots at playing really well this year.
Another well-known LA sports figure is Pete Carroll. Can you see Pete coaching again somewhere?
No, I don't. Well, if there was ever a better human being than Pete Carroll, man, I'm not going to lie to you. That being here during that period of time and watching the things that he did with those players and how he did it, and I don't, I see, I find that hard to believe. It's like I don't think he's going to go to another team, and I know it's probably difficult for him to be sitting in an office watching what goes on down there and not being able to look a player in the face and look him in the eye and say, if you do this, if you do that, come on. And the most positive, one of the most positive human beings I've ever known. And I was lucky enough to find out early what he was used to do late at night while he'd get out in that van and go out through Southern California and South Central and help underprivileged families and get them food and take care of their kids and help them with clothes and help them with other things. And a lot of people, he did that almost 3 or 4 nights a week, and people had no idea that he was doing it. Never told anybody about it. Yeah, he's just a good human being. There's very few people like Pete Carroll.
Well, I got a little thought about Pete's age. We have an 81-year-old president, a 78-year-old guy running to be the next president. So food for thought. So.
I know. And in all honesty, I'm the same age as Pete. So, oh yeah, I'm the same age as Pete, and I understand what he's saying. You get to a position where you think to yourself, well, I still think I can do a lot of things that I could do 10, 15 years ago. At least I think I can, and I try to do, and I keep myself in some sort of shape and position to do it. And I'm sure Pete thinks the same thing. I mean, hell, but the thing is, he's still got all his hair. I don't.
I've gotten very gray. I'm in my early 50s. I'm starting to feel a few changes now for sure.
It happens. It happens.
A couple minutes, Carlos. I got kind of a more serious question for you.
Right.
What's the biggest challenge you've had in your career in media?
The the business I worked in has a lot of egos, a tremendous amount of egos, just like I think like most businesses. But there's a little more, it's a little more ego based because people are constantly propping you up about, oh, you're good, or you've done this, or people are walking up to you while you're here or there, not even working, and saying this to you and saying that to you. So your ego gets propped up a little bit. But the difficult part of that, there's a lot of people that begin to believe that about themselves as opposed to just being human beings and regular people, and understanding that basically, okay, you do what you do for a living, but it's still just a job. If I could change anything about my job, would have been this, is that I wish I just could have walked in and worked very hard and not have to deal with what may or may not be going on around me in terms of the egos. Because there were even people that would mess with you to a certain extent, for lack of a better word, mentally, whatever, just because they could or they wanted to, even if they had nothing to do with you and your job. It's just what goes on there. It's a hard job just to go in and do really well and walk out the door, and without anybody looking at you thinking to themselves otherwise, or maybe thinking that maybe I can. It's kind of a paranoid thing, and I know people are going to give me a hard time about this, but trust me, other people say the same thing about it. It's difficult that way. If you could just walk in and do your job and do it well and walk out the door and go, yeah, that was great, instead of thinking about the other stuff, the ancillary stuff that can go on, all the paranoid and games and whatever, it would have been different. But that's the way it is. That's what you have to accept under the circumstances, because everybody has an ego.
Always wondering, maybe the sports director wants to bring someone else in, right? There's always a little.
Oh yeah. And that's the other part of the game, though. I mean, that's what it is. You're only as good as what you've done. And I think one of the best stories I ever heard was from this former sports anchor that I worked with, and he's on the air, and everything's going to hell in a handbasket. Stories aren't coming up right. The prompter's not working correctly. This isn't that isn't this. They're asking him about the wrong thing. But he gets through it. He comes downstairs, and I look at him. I go, wow, man, that was terrible. I'm sorry, brother. That was horrible. He goes, it's all right. And I go, really? He goes, listen, you have to learn one thing about this business. And the most important thing you have to learn is this. They're not paying you when it goes right. They're paying you when it goes wrong. That's what they're paying you for. So when things go to hell around you, That's why they pay you the big bucks, to make sure and take care of it then. Because anybody can do it if it's like this the entire time. Anybody can. But when it goes to hell in a handbasket, that's why they're paying you. I learned more that day than I learned any other time about that business.
So I guess one of the biggest challenges in your career is a natural challenge. Is being a little bit paranoid. What's going to happen next, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. My kind of work, I had that too. Well, I'm going to
I'm
ask you
sure
two
Tom,
more
I'm sure
questions.
Tom probably told. I'm sure Tom probably even said the same thing to a certain extent.
Similar, yeah,
Yeah.
similar. Two more questions, and we'll see if Olivia has anything after my two questions. So, what
Okay.
advice do you give young people today who want to go into sports media, Carlos?
Um, well, the most important thing, and this is what I was taught, and I wish I would have been better at it, but I did get better at it, is learn how to write, period. It's simple. Write, and learn how to write for yourself so that when you regurgitate what it is you're writing, people understand it. And more importantly, it doesn't have to be eloquent prose. It just has to be good and written well so people understand it, and descriptive. In other words, understand that you've got to, when you're saying something to somebody else and you're telling them, like you go watch something, you come back, you tell them what you saw. All right. You have to make them see the same thing you saw and feel the same thing you felt. Write it down, write it so you understand it yourself as well as wait to regurgitate it to somebody else.
Good feedback. Good feedback. And what's in the future for Carlos Del Valle?
Oh, for the time being, I'm going to play golf tomorrow. No, you know what? I'm probably going to get back out there, do some more auditions next week. I'm really, at this point in time, like I said, I enjoy what I'm doing. I love to play golf. I love going hiking. I love getting out there and exercising. I go to the gym a couple of days a week too, besides hike 3 to 4 times a week. I'm playing golf anywhere between, 1 to 3 times a week. It all depends on how, if I can get out there and do it. So yeah, and just enjoy myself. And if there's anything I can ever do to help other people in any way, shape, or form, especially when it comes to children, I love doing that too, which I do, which we won't get into, but at the same time, those are the things that are important to me. Helping other people and giving back, and really staying healthy, because staying healthy changes your life completely. I don't care who you are. And if there's one thing I can tell people, it's like, stay healthy and keep this thing going. Keep it going all the time. This thing and this thing. You don't do that, it's a pretty miserable life. And more importantly, once you retire, don't just sit around. Get your butt out of the house and do things. You got to get out. You got to get out and do things. You got to meet new people. You got to see new things, and you got to continue to learn. They're so important. They're really important to me.
Don't get stagnant, is Del Valle's advice. Yeah.
No, do not get stagnant. You got to
Yeah.
keep moving, baby. Who was it? Josh Gibson says, no, it was there's somebody coming behind you. I can't remember who it was.
That's
I don't know if
Page.
it's Josh.
Yeah,
There it was. Satchel Paige. Yeah.
well, this has been a lot of fun, Carlos. What a treat for a sports fan of my generation, Seattle, to get over an hour of with Carlos Del Valle. I've been very generous.
I didn't even think it's been an hour. Wow, this is great. No, I appreciate you
over an
calling
hour.
me.
Yeah. We'll see if Olivia has anything. Olivia, you got anything for Carlos?
Sort of stole my question. As far as advice for young people, not specific to working in sports, what would you tell your younger self or people kind of getting into the real world?
Wow. Getting into the real world. Yeah, you're going to go to law school, aren't you?
Hopefully.
Well, I wish you luck. I hope you do too. I think it's a different way to look at things these days for young people, especially with the social media thing. It's got to be so much more difficult for you than it was for me way back when. Not that it wasn't easy, but at the same time, it's got to be more difficult. You have to understand that everything that you say or do when it comes to a lot of that will be seen and used by other people. But most importantly, if it's who you are, if it's what you want to be, then stay true to yourself. It's the hardest thing to do. If no matter what anybody else says, stay true to yourself. Always understand also too that there are other people that know a hell of a lot more about something than you do. And those are the people you want to ask questions about. And if they're going to, and most of the time, it's amazing how I was helped by so many people in my career that all I did was ask. And you say to yourself, well, most of the time people are going, I don't want to bother them. All they're going to do is say no. That's fine. They can say no. That's no big deal. No is no big deal because somebody else is going to say yes. And it's the person or people who do say yes to you that will help you get to where you want to get. It's like that. It's like when my girlfriend said you should come over here to WSU to get an internship. If I hadn't gotten that internship at Cairo in Seattle, I don't think I'd be or have done what I've done in terms of my career, or at least it would have been a lot more difficult, much more difficult. So you got to you got to do things. You can't be afraid to do things, and you can't be afraid to hear the word no. I know that's simple, but trust me, it's not as simple as it sounds, because so many people never even approach the question before they hear the word no. So approach it, get over it, find somebody else who will help you. That's the most important thing.
Right. Anything else, Olivia, for Carlos?
I don't think so, but I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Great.
Anytime.
What a
Anytime.
great hour and change. And it's you and I stay in touch, Carlos.
Let's definitely do that, Paul, and I appreciate it. I'm going to send you that story on the girls that won the championship, the former Kobe team. And listen, this was great. This was fun. Hopefully it was helpful, and hopefully it was informative for people, and hopefully I didn't ramble too much.
No, I had a great time. Thanks, Carlos. We'll be in touch.